My name is Kimberly Martirano, and I am joined by Jean Denny today, and we are from Des Moines Public Schools. We're going to start today with just telling you a little bit about us and who we are. And
So, as Kim said, my name is Jean Denny. I'm a data analyst with the Des Moines Schools, and I've been with Des Moines Schools now for about 3 years. And as Kim and I were kind of talking about how do we want to kick things off, and you know, in education especially, I think it's important that people understand where you come from, because a lot of times we have business people that come in education, or education people go into business. And so my background has been education. I've been in education now for 25 years. I started off as a middle school science teacher back in 19... Loved it, but I kind of wanted to be in that technology realm. That was kind of when all the networks were coming out and stuff, and so I got into some of the technology stuff in Des Moines Schools. I spent 10 years there originally. Wasn't looking to change, but I'd gotten married and we were starting to have kids, and in one of the suburbs there, a position opened up that was director of technology that I felt I was qualified for, and was lucky enough to get that job. And so I spent about 6 years in that school district, Johnston, outside of Des Moines, Iowa. Loved it, loved being around all the new technology and stuff, but came across the student information system that some of you may know about called Infinite Campus, and it was up and coming, and I got excited about it, and I decided they offered me a position to go to work with one of their resellers, and so I did that for about 6 years. And actually, as a part of that job, and Kim and I both worked in the same place, we traveled around the country for training Infinite Campus, and at that time they also took on this new analytics product they liked a lot called Tableau. And so not only was I traveling around training Infinite Campus, but I was training how to use Tableau against this SQL database called Infinite Campus. And so I did that for 6 years. Again, loved the job, loved traveling. Wife was not so excited about the traveling as I was, and so after 6 years I decided it was time to kind of come back and get to know my family again. And so it was about 3 years ago now that I went back to Des Moines Schools as a data analyst. And so my role at Des Moines Schools is kind of twofold. I spend all my time looking at Tableau, which is great, by the way. I don't have any other responsibilities other than making sure our SQL databases are up and operational, and kind of making sure that all of our custom stuff is done, and if there's problems, I take care of that. So from my vantage point, it's great because I get to look at Tableau from the time I walk in to the time I leave every day.
And I started my career in education as well. I was a technology teacher at the high school level and enjoyed it very much, but found an opportunity at the district level to enhance the technology that teachers were using in their classroom. So I started helping teachers with their instructional technology, and then transitioned into assisting the technology team with the implementation of Infinite Campus as well as Tableau. And I trained our district in all of our student information system and Tableau. And then Jean recruited me to Des Moines. I'm an Illinois native. It might come out a little bit. You might hear my voice. I will try to hide it. But I'm really passionate about the data that we're showing and the impact that the data has on our students and their achievement. So we're excited to show you what we've got today. So on our agenda, you'll have to excuse us. We've had quite the morning with technical difficulties. How many of you do not have good Wi-Fi at your hotel right now? Yeah. Well, I was trying to extract what was it, 10 million rows of data this morning because something happened with my extract, and needless to say, it did not work. But anyway. All right, on our agenda this morning, we are going to go over a little bit about Des Moines Public Schools, tell you about our students and our Tableau makeup and our structure, and then Jean is going to dive into the predictive analytics piece, which we're really excited about, and kind of where we started and where we're at now. I am going to talk about our student achievement data and how we are currently looking at our student achievement data, and then we will give you a chance to answer some questions. And
if you haven't noticed, Kim and I started this last year when we were working on our presentation. We presented at the Vegas convention last year as well. But one of the things that we decided when we started doing this is the story points, the storyboard stuff had just come out in Tableau. We're like, why in the world would I build a PowerPoint presentation to show Tableau with screenshots when I can do it here? But what you do notice is as we go from slide to slide here, there's a little bit of lag. It's actually loading Tableau vizzes into our presentation. So just kind of bear with us. We have some issues there as they come and go.
So what you're seeing now is actually our Des Moines schools webpage and a viz that we've shared out with our community. And this particular viz allows our community members, our board members, to hop into various different school levels, but look at our demographics at our buildings, look at our achievement at our buildings. So I'm going to use a Tableau viz to walk you through a little bit about our district. We've got just under 34,000 students. We are waiting for our certified enrollment for this school year. But as of last school year, we are just under 34,000 students. We have just under 74% free and reduced meal population, which means that really almost 100% of our students are qualifying for free and reduced meals based on that high of a percentage. 20% English language learners, and a huge amount of refugees coming into our school district right now. And then we've got about a 15, this year it's actually about a 16% special education population. We have 7,000 employees, all utilizing Tableau, and Jean will go into that a little bit more, but did want to show you a little bit about, or a little sneak peek of a viz that we're using on our website. It's via Tableau Public. We've got some achievement data on there, so if I'm moving into the school district, I can take a look at the neighborhoods in which I'm looking at homes and see kind of a school report card for each of our buildings and the achievement based on our state assessment and that demographic distribution.
So it was kind of interesting you talked about this being on Tableau Public, and we went and watched Cherry Creek's demonstration yesterday, which was fantastic, by the way, if you missed it. We've tried to do more and more of this. We're working very hard to be a transparent district with our community. And so in order to embed Tableau visualizations into your own websites, it's been kind of a difficult challenge for us. You know, you've got to have an unlimited license of some sort. You can't have any kind of authentication. But we discovered Tableau Public, or actually it's Tableau Online now, and so by publishing it there, we can actually put that source code into our web page and provide this, provided, and those of you in K-12 know, you got to be very careful of confidentiality things. So none of the information that we put out on Tableau Public has any student identifiable information. It's all pre-aggregated before we put it out there. And it's something you just have to be very, very careful of. So that's just one of the examples of what we did that. We also did a lot of work with mapping. We've actually mapped our school boundaries in Tableau and put that out for our school district, or our community to see. We presented that at last year's conference as well. And just the reason I want to come back to this real quick is a shout out. If you haven't heard about the Information Lab, they're a company out of the UK. They helped us kind of do this original stuff about 2 years ago. Great company. If you ever need some help, they're here. All right, let's move on and look at Tableau itself a little bit. And we want to get into the meat and potatoes of this, but I want you to understand where we are coming from and what our journey has looked like to get there and what our architecture currently is. So we have right now 12 desktop licenses for Tableau. Okay? We've got actually a department of about 15 to 18, I'm not sure exactly where we stand now, that are in a department called Research and Data Management. And that group is responsible for managing all data from our student information system, Infinite Campus. It's for, HR data, business finance data. We handle all the data side of those things. We are not a part of IT. We were a couple years ago. We've now been moved out to this own group. We actually report to our Dr. Grinstead, who reports directly to our superintendent. So we're kind of out on a little island of our own, because they don't want any influences from their departments to influence what we're looking at for data, which has provided us a nice bit of autonomy, if you will. So those 12 licenses, for the most part, are within our department, because we do most of the analytics and the visualization creation. We've got a couple of them out in operations to do some things as well. On top of that, we do have Tableau Server. We went ahead and purchased an unlimited version of this, if you will. So we've got an unlimited interactor license is what it looks like for us. We currently, I was looking at this before we came down here to Texas on Sunday, we're at about 8,600 users in our Tableau server who have access to it. Now, I'm not saying that's how many use it. That's how many licenses are in use. That's tied to our Active Directory. That's how I can kind of see where we are number-wise. In terms of who is using it, we're everything from the top brass, your C-suite type of people, a lot of the chiefs level, district level administration, building level administration, and we have now started to deploy to teachers. And so some of the things that you're going to see Kim show are actually visualizations that have been deployed now to our teaching staff, so which has been very exciting for us. We also use Tableau Public to some degree, not as much as we once were, primarily for those visualizations that we want the community to be able to see. The things like school report cards, what is the performance like at every one of those buildings. So let's get into the predictive analytics and dropout prevention itself, and let's talk about kind of where we've started and where we're at now. Go ahead, Kim.
About 2 years ago, when I started with Des Moines Public Schools, the district was using this early indicator system, what they called the EIS report, to identify students that were at risk. And when I took a look at this EIS report, and really when I was hired, they said we need to improve this. It's not working for us. And what it was this extensive Excel spreadsheet that was run every 6 weeks. So we'd get to this 6-week mark and we'd pull all of this data into this monstrous spreadsheet. By the time we compiled it and ran all of these equations on the data and did some pivot tables, and the data itself didn't get released until 6 weeks after we were pulling it. So it was this old information. It really wasn't real-time data. And when we're looking at at-risk students that we don't want to drop out, we need to identify them now. So there was a need to improve that process. So we moved into this dropout prevention report in Tableau, which has been really exciting. So on a daily basis, we can identify students that are at risk now via this Tableau report. So as soon as a student reaches a various indicator, attendance, for example, the dropout prevention team knows it. Now, the trouble with both of those reports is that we made up this formula. We said, oh yeah, attendance is important. If kids aren't attending, then they're gonna drop out. So it was kind of this, well, attendance is important and behavior is important and grades are important, and this particular level of achievement in an assessment is important. It was very arbitrary. It was a team of people sitting down around the table, and a very smart team of people, but it was still arbitrary. We did our best to guess until now, which is really exciting.
And so what happened was, as we looked at what they had done, and what they had done was not bad. You're actually going to see what that looked like here in just a second. But we weren't able to take that information and really predict the future. And so we can say, okay, we've got, let's say originally there was 22 indicators. And again, it came from a nice little brain trust of people, nothing against what they were doing, but you had to wait for a student to hit a threshold before you could identify them as being at risk based upon this arbitrary indicator, okay? So how can we take that, and I would say take that, I'm thinking statistically, Kim, can you and I, do we have enough brain power between the two of us? And that was questionable at the time for the two of us to do this, but we thought, can we take that information we have and apply it moving forward before the kids hit those thresholds? And so that's kind of the last little part of what I'm going to present to you today to show you how we did that.
So this is a look at the report that we created a year ago. This is that early indicator system taking all of those indicators and throwing it into Tableau. So no longer was it this 6-week delay of a report, but you can see across the top we've got our students, we've got their grade level, and yes or no, are they hitting the indicators that we are following? Grades, attendance, behavior. It's color-coded. I can drill down to all the students that have more than one indicator. I can see really bright red the students that are credit deficient and the students that aren't attending enough, but it's still very much just table data. And again, we were waiting for kids to reach the trigger criteria. We were waiting for them to be absent enough to get the yes on absence for them to turn red, and then in my opinion be a little bit, we as a dropout prevention team were being a little bit too late to the game. So.
Oops, I hit the wrong thing, I'm sorry.
I think I grabbed it already. So as Einstein says, everything that is being counted doesn't necessarily count.
That's kind of an important concept here. You go ahead and move it forward for me once. And so I want to kind of I talked about the original 22 indicators we had. Okay, of those 22 indicators, we identified 12 of those 22 that we thought that we could quantify somehow from our student information system. So there were some things that didn't really fit in terms of their survey data, such as do you feel you have a best friend in a staff member? Do you feel connected to your community? Those are types of things also that are questions being asked that we aren't, it's good questions. And at some point we're going to address that, but we can't quantify that in our student information system today. So we kind of culled that 22 list down to these 12. And one of them, they're all showing up here. And this is just a simple tree map showing what those 12 are. You're going to kind of understand the sizes of why they look like they do here in a little bit. But we're looking at things like, are they behind on course credit? Do they have current failing grade? The typical stuff we look at. But we're going to apply these differently here at some point, where we're not going to wait for them to start failing things. We're not going to wait for them to start missing 10% or more of their attendance days. We're going to use past data to predict the future. Okay? So I'm going to kind of lay out how I did this. This was kind of a pet project I had. It started probably 8 or 9 months ago. Kim and I got together. We loved presenting last year at the Vegas conference. We're like, do we want to do it again? And the question really wasn't, do we want to do it again? It was, do we have the content that we think we need to share or not? And we came up with this idea of, predictive analytics is so important these days. I don't see it being used a lot in K-12. Can we do it here? And so what we did, I'll kind of lay this out here. We've got a couple of different items here. This is looking at historical data, and I'll look at each one separately here in just a second. But basically, we've taken the last 5 years of data to create what you're seeing on the screen right now. Okay? I'm going to grab that clicker from you if I could. Thanks.
Throw it at you.
Throw it at me or throw it to me? Let's move ahead here to the first one. And basically what I've done is taken that top one and just kind of blown it up for you. Okay? What you're seeing here is a scatter plot of the total number of indicators that turn to a yes for those kids. So last 5 years, how many indicators were yes? And then we created on this x-axis a statistical value that I called the dropout coefficient. It's totally Gene Denny speak. Okay? There's nothing you're going to find anywhere online that uses this. We think of this as a probability number. So based upon past guidance, number of predictive indicators that they were drop out, and then how much that happened. I'll show you how we came up with this bottom number here. The bottom part of that dashboard you saw looked at the performance of that. So basically, again, on the y-axis, percentage of students who dropped out, and on the x-axis, based upon the number of those 12 indicators they had at the point in which they dropped out, okay, over the last 5 years. What we noticed, to some degree, made sense, and then at one point, it didn't. And I can probably see where it stopped making sense to us. So as we get more and more indicators, when they hit the 7 indicators, it's a pretty high number that they're going to, a high probability they're going to drop out. 38% of the kids who had 7 indicators dropped out at that point in time. Okay? After that, it started falling off. And we started thinking, well, why is that? Well, because by the time, we don't know for sure, but we think by the time they hit this, they're going to drop out, and we're seeing fewer and fewer of them who get more than that. They're already gone now. So they're not showing up in these numbers. That's why it's dropping off so drastically. So, that 7 seems to be a tipping point, which means we have to do something before then, because by that time it's too late. I think I hit it. Maybe you have to hit it for me, Kim. Come on. There we go. All right. So let's look at, here's 4 of those indicators we looked at. All right. The first one is our attendance indicator. You can see that one that's right up here at the top. What we did is we did a correlational study. Now we'll be careful of using correlational studies in general. You can correlate, how bad my feet smell with the weather. It makes no difference. But anyway, we got to be careful of those things. And you'll see how we kind of took that into account. In this case, we calculated, Pearson's R. And the correlational value was a 0.108 for attendance. Now, by attendance, we meant the students missed greater than or equal to 10% of the days in which they were enrolled would be a yes value, if you will. Okay? So this bubble chart, what it's showing is basically on the left hand of the y-axis, are they absent greater than or less than 10%? In other words, did we identify them then? If we did identify them, what percentage of those ended up dropping out? Now, of course, we have some interventions in place that we use for this. Okay, but basically, if we identified them as being absent more than 10%, about a little over 3.5% ended up dropping out. So this is kind of telling me that whatever interventions are being used, and I'm not responsible for those interventions. Okay, I just give them the data, they figure out that part of it out themselves. We'll say we're doing a pretty good job. And so we've looked at each of these 4, actually we looked at all 12 of them. We found that mobility, did they move 3 or more times in a school year, or 6 or more times in their K-12 career in our district, was our mobility indicator. Were they not proficient on standardized tests? Are they behind on core credit? Well, as you look at those R values, what you're finding is some are more important than others. Duh. Okay, we should know this already. We know some things are more important or more indicative of a future dropout than other things. All of them, however, are important. We just need to figure out how important was each one. So on the previous ones, we were looking at the previous EIS report, for example, we're counting the number of indicators. But by doing that, we are assuming every indicator is of equal value to every other indicator. There's nothing wrong with that. I just think we can do better. That's where we came to this then. Sorry, just to blow up with that same one. I apologize, I should have shown that earlier. All right, so let's take what we did then. We took those 12 indicators. We already have this linear regression model of each one. We actually did that through Alteryx. If you don't use Alteryx, just a little plug for them. We don't use it a ton, but we like what we've seen so far. It kind of shapes your data before you get it to Tableau. Allows you to kind of play and massage it a little bit. Okay? And basically, from that, we took those 12 indicators and using Alteryx on a multiple regression model, it told us this big, long algorithm. So basically, it weighted each of the indicators for us and told us, here's the solution. Now, I'm a little leery that's the solution yet, but based upon our past 5 years, it kind of gives us a yes, no, how apt is a student to drop out based upon those weighted values now for each of the 12 indicators. Does that make sense? Am I doing that justice? Am I doing it too much? Okay. I can talk about this stuff all day, so I love it. All right. So from there, it gave us a number. We wanted a number that came between 0 and 1. Why is that? Let's step back just a second. The first time Kim and I heard about this set of indicators we wanted to use, we had a person who's responsible for our school climate transition or
School climate and culture.
School climate and culture director. Okay, and he's the one that came with us and said, here are the things we want to look at. Great. And we're looking at this list of 22 indicators. 34,000 students, ballpark. Kim and I looked at each other and we kind of chuckled. We shouldn't have. We kind of chuckled and said, every kid's going to fall on one of these lists. What's the point? We need to be able to give something to a building administrator or an interventionist and say, here are the kids who are most likely, and not 22 separate lists to go off of. And so we had this algorithm built that weighted each of them differently and gave a single value between 0 and 1. And I coined the term dropout coefficient. It's really probability of dropping out based upon those indicators. And so on the x-axis, in the x-axis here, you're seeing that value, that dropout coefficient, that is the outcome of that big algorithm. Okay, so why the color coding? What do we do from here? I just banded this. Basically said, okay, these students from here to the right, 50% chance or more that they will drop out. And if you want to actually highlight just a few for me, we can go through, and if we wanted to, we could look at each one of these. There are several of them that are stacked, so it's not just 20 dots. There's probably 1,200 dots under there, if you will. But we can identify them, and then the actual functional version of this, by the way, those names are all made up. I found a great tool to do that online. Okay, we can identify who those kids are and that dropout coefficient. Okay, so everything from the 0.5 on up, so that's an intensive at-risk intervention. From 0.3 to 0.5, we've got the more moderate intervention. We've got a lower, we call it a monitoring level, and then the ones who really have very little risk of dropping out from there. So we just applied that algorithm to our current students. Now, as I talk about that, and I'm kind of wrapping up this predictive part of things, using our last 5 years of data was important to creating this, because the algorithm we created in Des Moines, Iowa, probably means very little to Los Angeles, California. Their indicating algorithm would not match, I'll call it suburban or urban Iowa. Okay, it doesn't make sense. So I can't just say, this is the solution. It's unique to every single district in the country. But I think by using an approach like this, and this is not the saving grace by any means, this is just one warped data analyst from Des Moines trying something different, I think there's some validity to it. As we continue to move forward, what our plan is to do is to take every new year then and add that new year data set to our existing algorithm, our existing end value, if you will, to try and make it more and more and more valid for our district. This is our algorithm, our district's data. Does that make sense? Okay. Now from this, as we were talking about, you can actually, in our functional version of this, select one of those dots, and they're going to find out then who the students are who fall in this. So we originally found ourselves making a lot of visualizations that looked like this in Tableau, which drive me up a freaking wall. This is Excel in Tableau, basically. But it's what they wanted to see those names. I mean, it was something simple they had to have. And so by clicking one of those dots, there's a dashboard action that takes them to the students who are in that actual list for them.
Nobody else has had that request, right? No one?
No, never.
And again, these are not real names from Des Moines, Iowa, so it's safe. If you're taking pictures, I have no worries there. Now, we took that same kind of a correlational, I guess, approach, if you will, and wanted to look at how is this going to affect what we're doing in the classroom. So everyone's always working on aligning a curriculum with this, that, and the other. And so we kind of applied some of the same philosophies as we move forward and looking at where are we at currently with our curriculum as well. I'm going to let Kim handle that part of it.
Thank you, Jean. No. All right, so the pieces that I'm going to go over is really where we were at a couple years ago and the progression that we've had. And where we were at when I started with the district was we were looking at student achievement data at the end of every semester and at the end of every annual statewide test. Or even we'd look at our 3 times a year testing and we try and compare last semester data with this test that we're taking once a year. And it was after the kids had taken the test, after the instruction was received, after the students were no longer sitting in the same seats that they were sitting in based on the data that we were looking at. So it was really this ex post facto reporting. How do you make a decision as a teacher in your classroom when you're looking at data from a year ago? So what we did is we created a Tableau report. Again, very similar to that EIS. We junked the 6-week-old Excel spreadsheet, the year-old Excel spreadsheet, and got this data into Tableau. So I will show you a little bit of what that looks like, but we're diving directly into the teacher grade books and with a daily view of how are students doing in their classes today. And then as soon as they take the assessment, we're able to analyze where that assessment score is looking as well. So, and then now today, where we're headed, is we had kind of this, here's our grade book set up, and here's our grade book visualization, and here's our assessment visualization. Well, now where we're headed and where we're at now is actually bringing those two together. So bringing that assessment data and seeing how is it correlating with the student achievement scores in the grade book itself. So a little bit about our grading at Des Moines Public Schools. We've been transitioning into a standards-based grading. We have implemented standards reference grading in our school district based on Marzano's, yes, Mr. Marzano. We all know him, right? Next year will be our last year. So next year, 100% of our classrooms will be using standards-based grading. So it's been I believe a 5-year transition, and next year will be the last year where we're 100% standards reference grading. So
it went really smooth.
Oh, that growth mindset, I love it. So I'm going to show you a little bit, well, I'll let you read this first. So this is a little bit of what it has driven kind of my passion about the data visualizations that we're looking at. It's why are we testing? What's happening in the classroom versus testing? And the assessment data should be used immediately. It should, if a student is taking a test today, I should be using that information immediately to determine, does that student need additional intervention? Does that student need maybe some GT or, gifted and talented? Are we all educators here? I can use all those goofy, So a little bit of why I'm so passionate. This right here is a visualization that was used and is still currently used in our school district. This is data looking at our Iowa assessment scores. And that is our annual once-a-year assessment. Our administration used this assessment, and I say used because thankfully we are transitioning away from it, but used this assessment as their annual goal setting. So this one time a year assessment, we were looking at student achievement both in proficiency and growth, to determine where should the kiddos be at next year and how are we going to adjust our instruction and how are we going to adjust our curriculum on this one day, this one assessment, this one test. So we've got our growth scatter plot up at the top showing by school what was the average typical growth met. And then we've got our math, this is math data, our math proficiency by school, by grade level. So every principal was sitting down looking at these percentages and saying, well, we've got to increase proficiency by this much next year. And then we were looking at our average national scale scores at each grade level, at each building. Okay, so this was the driving force in our goal setting, and it had nothing to do with the instruction that was being taught in the classroom. And we didn't even know if our instruction in the classroom had any sort of relationship with this data. So what the teachers are using now is our grades dashboard. So this is a look into our course grade analysis as well as our topic score analysis. So at the top, you're seeing a grade distribution by course. So I can drill down and I can look at a course at a time. And this might take a little while, but Jean, can you maybe grab some English courses or maybe just one department? Okay. So we're seeing by course where are students in their learning right now today. And I can identify any of those kiddos in my red and yellow and orange bars are my students that need additional interventions in that course. Or my students in my blue bar maybe need some additional enrichment. I need to offer them maybe some GT, those sorts of things. And then what I can do is I can dive into the individual topics in each class. So those are the standards. Okay, we call them topics in Des Moines because there are multiple standards within a topic. But I can look at my analyzing a central idea from an English class and I can see, all right, I've got 7.14 students that need some help in analyzing. So then I can dive even deeper into that and I can identify what group of students those are. Is it a particular teacher? Is it at a particular school? Do I need to adjust my professional development happening around like that big 12.48% of analysis and reflection? Okay. So we had our assessment dashboard, we have our grade book dashboard, and this next viz is actually some student detail on that grade book data. So a colleague of mine, David Roney, created this, and what it's doing is it's clustering the students based on their standard score, and it's giving the teachers the ability to filter down to the body of students that they'd like to see. So I can see by student, and it's hard to see because I'm using student person IDs here rather than student names, but that's an individual student name, and I can see every topic that's being assessed, every standard that's being assessed in every one of their grade books. and where they're currently earning a score in that grade book. So the teachers have the ability to dive into those blue clusters at the top, and it's a little bit difficult to see here, but we've got red clusters very similar to that grade distribution. So this is a great one for the teachers. They drill down to their name in the filter, they look at just their population, they identify their differentiated instruction groups. So I've got red group here, blue group here, etc. And I can adjust my instruction immediately.
And this is one of the things on this also for us is this is real time for us. Okay, this is actually tapping into the back end of our SQL database. They're not waiting for an extract every night, et cetera, et cetera. This is real time. As soon as a teacher hits the save button in their grade book, it's being reflected then in the Tableau visualization for them. So they're not waiting for that 24-hour to 6-week type of refresh style. We want to stay as close to when it happens as possible so we can make that difference.
And this has really been great too for our professional learning communities. Our PLCs are using this data to do some collaborative teaching and collaborative grouping among various different classrooms as well. So it's really been impactful at our buildings. Okay. So we had our visualization that had just assessment data, and then we had our visualization that had just our student achievement data in a particular classroom. So what I've done here is I'm bringing them together. The district just implemented this year the NWA MAP assessment. We're a little bit behind the game. Everybody's doing it, right? And now we're on board. But we piloted at 3 buildings last year, and now we are all buildings. And did I mention we have like 67 buildings? It's a lot of buildings to implement a test like that. But nevertheless, what you're seeing here is a distribution of our language arts SRG scores. So where are students scoring in their grade books today versus where are students at in their MAP reading score. So this test was just taken, our testing window just closed in October, and now I can see immediately as soon as that test is taken versus the scores that they're earning in that grade book, what is my trend line look like? Why are my students over here that are earning a 240 on MAP, what's going on, but still earning only a 2.0, which a 2.0 is not great in rubric value. So as a teacher, I can dive into this and I can drill down and I can identify those students that are rocking it on the MAP test, but are currently failing my class. What's going on? What is it that I need to do in my classroom so that student is showing me the knowledge that they clearly have based on the test, or vice versa. So my students that are achieving not so great on the MAP test but have exceptional grades in my grade book, is it a kiddo I really like? That never happens, right? No. No, the standards reference grading is kind of eliminating that. It's truly what the kiddos know in the classroom today.
One of the things I like about this too, Kim took advantage of one of the new Tableau 10 features here too. So when you start grabbing these things on the scatter plot, all your trend lines can be on the fly reestablished. So if she wants to know what the future for these folks hold, for example, it's very simple to see that. It's just a selection. This is just a new feature in Tableau 10.
The next visualization that I have showing a relationship is, again, looking at the language arts scores, 1 through 4 rubric value, and then where the student is scoring on that RIT score. But I've got it now separated by topic, so it's no longer just the overall score within language arts. Now I'm looking at it topic by topic, so analyzing point of view, analyzing textual, I don't know what that one is. No. So I can see my color coding here is showing me every topic that's being taught in that classroom, and I can really identify, the kids that are excelling in analyzing textual evidence, how are they doing on that MAP assessment? Do I need to adjust or look at things a little bit differently? Again, how are these kiddos over here that are rocking out that MAP test currently failing my class? So I just maybe haven't given them the opportunity to show me that they've learned that data, or learned that topic rather. So really exciting information for our teachers here. This next one is something that is more useful for our administrators. So what we're seeing here is by color, our teachers. And again, my language arts scores versus my map reading scores. And I can see really quickly that Mrs. Smith does not have students that are achieving very well, and what's going on. Perhaps as an administrator, I need to work with Mrs. Smith, or I need to have Mrs. Smith go into Mr. Peterson's classroom and see what's happening in that classroom for some, maybe some additional strategies or techniques to get those students engaged and learning, etc. So it's a little bit of a different take on what's happening with this achievement data. We know that it's a very hot topic now when it comes to teacher evaluation and student achievement. So this shows that relationship as well here.
Anyone see any issues with putting this out there for people to see? No problem, right? See how well, because the first thing to think is, well, what's wrong with Miss Smith? Okay, and that's, I mean, this is a scary thing to approach, but it's something we have to look at. Are we blaming Ms. Smith? Not necessarily. I think by looking at it real quick, you're going to say, yep, I knew that. Kids don't like her, okay? But it may just be the style that she uses. Maybe she doesn't use the same approach to learning in this, was it a language arts class, that Ms. Brooks does. But now we get the opportunity, if you will, to work together. You had a question.
Yeah, it may actually be even more helpful to do more longitudinal on that student, because prior knowledge may not have been.
Correct,
So
correct.
that snapshot, not to mention how many times you administer math, how many times a year.
3 times a year. And so we haven't even gotten to that second testing cycle yet, which will be in January. So the amount of information that we're going to have in January, we're going to have those growth, that growth data, not just their current score. It will be, that will change what this looks like quite a bit in January.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. I just want to make sure that we don't, as educators, I think we tend to shy away from some of the hard things that we have to address. And this is one of them. And I hope we find that we don't do that all the time to shy away from that.
Is this also available publicly?
No.
What's your deadline?
No.
No.
Nope, not this one. Okay. So that is kind of where we're at right now in our journey as far as identifying students that are at risk and identifying those relationships between student achievement data in assessments and student achievement data within the classroom at the very the topic level. So we're really excited about what we're doing and where we're headed at Des Moines Public Schools, and hope you guys are too. But any questions that you have for us? Yes.
Oh, cool.
How do I need to talk into the microphone?
No, go ahead.
I'll repeat the question for you, yeah.
How do you provide that contextual information that you need so as to not get certain departments or teachers into any kind of hot water when they don't maybe necessarily need to be there?
No, that's a great question. In fact, I don't want to start this.
Go ahead.
Please
Do you want to
piggyback.
repeat it?
Yeah, the question was basically how do we make sure they're reading it right, if you will? It was the general question. You know, we've got a lot of things in here that need to be interpreted. How do we kind of get that data knowledge base, that base level stuff taken care of? This year, before we started our school year, Mary Grinstead, or Dr. Grinstead, our next level up the food chain, if you will, had us get together and do some goal setting sessions. And one of the things that we had done for goal setting was basically we want to increase our, what was the term we used? Data literacy.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not
Data
very literate.
literacy is a concern with administrators all the way down to teachers. We know that, right? Because this idea of using data to drive decision making, it does not necessarily come as natural as it is to us data geeks, right?
And so what we did to help with that, we made that one of our biggest goals. And we've now, we put out a monthly newsletter as well as a weekly kind of an email blast, if you will. And in every one of those, it offers an opportunity on these early out days, which for us happen every Wednesday, that one of us in the team will come out and provide that type of training, if you will. It's high level. It's basically, when you see this, what are you actually seeing? And kind of looking at, don't interpret it this way, but what you got to kind of open your eyes to the bigger picture, not just that, Alan is failing this class. And so we're starting to do some of that. We've had a couple of sessions now. We just started offering it this year. We're in early November. So we've had 2 sessions so far where schools have asked us to come out and do just that. So that's kind of how we're combating that. Does that answer the question for you? Yeah. I'm gonna come back. You already had one, so I'll come back for you, okay?
Can you talk more about how Infinite Campus and Tableau interact and how your user interact with the system? Is there multiple logins or is there one platform that serves all?
That's a great question, and the question was, how do Infinite Campus and Tableau interact, and are there multiple logins, et cetera? Infinite Campus is a SQL Server database. So we have a data warehouse that is refreshed nightly, as well as a replicated database that is a transactional database that is updating with, it's about a 3-second turnaround. So really every update or change that's made, every attendance mark that's saved is updating that replicated database. So a lot of our visits are connecting to that replicated database, a SQL database. And we are creating the visualizations with that database, publishing them out to Tableau server, and then we have a single sign-on environment where teachers are actually accessing the link to Tableau server from Infinite Campus, and it's authenticating with Infinite Campus.
Yeah, it's all done in the back end. So it's a single server line, a sign-on type of environment for them. Just by finding a link, are you an Infinite Campus user or? Okay, it's got a kind of an outline format to it, and in that outline, they've got a link that says My Tableau Reports, and it instantly links them without any kind of additional sign-on to the list of the reports. We've got, I think currently we're about 110 or 112 different reports in Tableau that are available to various groups.
And we're using Active Directory to assign those permissions to whether it's counselors, teachers, principals, et cetera. So I'm gonna do 1, 2, and then 3. So.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how did you determine what types of reports to do? What did you go out and gather any business, any input from your clients?
That's a great question. The question is, how do we decide what reports did we build, basically? Des Moines Schools had Tableau on the shelf for 3 years before I came on board. And I came on board right at 3 years ago, then Kim shortly followed just a few months later. And they actually decided to devote a FTE to this position to see if they can make Tableau fly in the districts that hadn't been. Well, luckily, I don't want to be arrogant, but I had Tableau experience, which is why I was hired in the first place, because I come from the K-12 Tableau environment. And so it's kind of easier for me to take off running. And so what I did at that point is I looked at what they had. I figured they had gone through some vetting process already to create what they had. But the problem was what they had, they were almost all running off of Excel extracts. So or Excel files. They would extract data from the SIS, dump it into Excel, build these beautiful, beautiful visualizations, and it stayed that way. Okay, and I told them from day one, if you hire me, I'd love this job, but I will not be doing that anymore. We're going to find a way to do it from our real-time data. And so basically, to get us started, I started with what they had. I took what they had. I kind of used some of my own ideas, and I'm not the most creative guy in the world. I like things very linear in format and very orderly, but I wanted to at least get it tapped into the real-time or near-time environment. And so I started there. And then as I did that, I looked at what was missing from what they already had and started building. When that happened, it just snowballed on its own. I didn't have to really think about what was I going to build next. It was, when in the world am I going to have time to do any of it? So.
Now we have a custom data request form, so when a new report is needed, anyone in the district can submit a custom data request. As a team, we vet the highest priority that comes in. So.
With user permissions, can teachers see other teachers? Can principals see other schools? And how do you manage that?
Great question. So the question was regarding user permissions and whether or not teachers can see other teachers' data or principals can see other principals' data. And right now we have user filters in place that are based on the school level for any of those visualizations that are teacher level, and some that you saw here that are gradebook level data. We have the user filter set up on building or school. So as a teacher, I can see every other teacher in my building. Same thing with the principals. I can see just my building's data. So if I have my science team, I can then look at every science teacher in my building. There's been a lot of controversy around whether or not we should open it up district-wide, and there's a very competitive environment, especially with our middle school. I don't know what it is about middle school, but they're very competitive, and there's been a lot of question around, do we open it up for everyone to see, because it will create that maybe little fire.
Did you start at that place, or did you have to battle to get to that? Because that would never fly in our district. Like, we have been told we have to get down to only teachers can see their students, only principals can see only their school. It's been, so the filter level permissions are a nightmare.
They are. So the question was, did we start there, or has this been a battle? And Jean and I are really pretty conservative when it comes to data release, and I oversee the data governance in our district as well. So I tend to be a little bit more conservative and not want to release as much data, but the district is very collaborative, and we have these PLC teams that, you know, they want to be working together, and they want to be sharing kids, and they're like, you're good at this, I need to know the kids that I should be serving. And so it's really
it was kind of top down. We didn't make a lot of those decisions, and that's going to change as leadership changes and stuff. But she's right. It was a battle. We both feel very strongly one way or the other, and we don't need to get into why and which one's right, et cetera. But yeah, it's not an easy thing to snap your fingers and make it happen.
Yeah. The gentleman back here, yes.
If you don't mind jumping back to the slide with your 12 indicators that you chose out of the 22 for dropout.
It's called just the 12 indicators.
And if you could just explain, getting back to clean data and real-time data, how accurate some of these are in real time, or if some of these still present challenges to you for gathering clean data, if you will, in real time.
Well, it's definitely a problem to have clean data. That's the job we're in. We know that. We've gotten really good at it, I think, as a district, but it's been probably a 5 to 8 year process. That's like Kim just said, she's responsible for our data governance initiative that we do, and that's one of the things they talk about is what goes where, why, and exactly how, and then that information gets disseminated, et cetera. For the most part, I'd say, without getting into specifics, we feel pretty good about them. We really do. I know that I would have said the same thing 8 months ago as I looked at this. And while this tree map kind of makes it look like you know what the exact weightings of each of them are, it's a little skewed. I did generalizations here, but I'm trying to look and see. I don't think there's any one of those here that I would say I'm not comfortable with saying that we've got pretty well validated. And if you look at those, I mean, failing grades, it's pretty easy to know yes or no. Absence, it's pretty easy to know yes or no. There's very few of these that aren't, I want to say, more objective, if you will. Okay, so I think we feel pretty good about it. It took some time to get there, and I promise I'd come back to you.
In your example of how you're getting somewhat predictive, your attendance seems to have the highest, R value. Have you thought about getting even more granular? And since your SIS system already has the data, pulling out, for example, is there a pattern or relationship with when a kid is out in connection to a grade or a behavior event? And then your sample size probably be big enough over time, so that your intervention becomes, you stop them before they go absent, so to speak. You might notice some patterns or some relationships that might actually trigger a call to mom and say, hey, listen, Chris may not be in school, whatever. I mean, you might begin to learn something about your culture in terms of what is driving your attendance.
No, you're exactly right. Exactly right. We just haven't gotten to that point. We just haven't gotten to that point yet. Yeah, I see that as part of our evolution, though.
I'll just make a real quick comment. This is the second K-12 session I've been in, and this issue about data transparency, it just really bothers me. So in my culture, I mean, in my district, we're in a community that's had a textile industry collapse, and our demographics have really changed. And we have a lot of schools where our teachers were teaching the kids they had 20 years ago. And if you don't have data transparency, you can't change your culture. So to people who say, my district, that would never fly in my district, then nothing's ever going to change. Teachers have to be able to see each other's data, because otherwise in PLCs, they can't learn from each other. And they're going to keep on doing the same thing that they've always done. I love the work that you're doing, But the rest of you, when you're doing this work, I'm really passionate about this transparency thing in my district because we have one school that was a legacy high school, and that demographic changed. It got poorer and darker, and those kids were being taught so poorly. It was educational malpractice. And when we got a leader in there who made those teachers share data, that culture changed. And that school is on a positive trajectory, but it never happens if you don't have data transparency in your schools and in your district.
And I think you can kind of see where Kim and I fall along those lines. You know, we're at the school level now. I think eventually we'd like to see it open up entirely across the district. We can only do so much in our roles. We're not on that end of the food chain,
I just
but
wanted to preach that.
appreciate that.
When we hear other people saying that's hard in my district, we'll do the hard work. It has to
And
happen.
we are, but if it's a top down, if your superintendent says to you, you will not, you
Then
can
what
only,
you gotta-
can only.
You
do
can't
so much.
override what your superintendent makes you do, but you can evangelize and you can show the data that shows these are the districts where the culture changes, and that's only in districts.
And I don't want to cut things off, but I want to make sure we get back here. We got about 3 or 4 minutes left is all. There's some more questions. So
There's a gentleman
great
here
topic.
in the white shirt and then the checkered shirt.
Okay, so I'm not in education,
What?
but great data, and that kind of want to see something that's kind of outside the box and take a look at. What has the district done differently because now they have this? We have less dropout rate, because I didn't hear that, and I think, so you get all this data, I've got a new program that I've come up with, and we're working on it. I mean, what's happening? Because it's great data, fine, but never act on it. What's going on?
Do you want to
Yeah,
take that?
what-
one?
People that are receiving it, right?
The question is, what's being done with this data and what change is it making, really? And this data is, and in its both previous form and current form, is available to our dropout prevention program. So we have someone that oversees dropout prevention, and that team determines then what is being put into place, whether it's our attendance folks being deployed, or whether it's our behavior folks being deployed, or whether it's our credit recovery folks, or we have increased the amount of Flex Academy labs and online learning availability. So there are decisions being made and driven based on this data. As far as the improvements that have been made, we are really only in year 2 of using some of these tools and having this information at our fingertips. We were kind of in that late ex post facto analysis stage. So we are seeing improvements when it comes to dropout prevention, but they are not this huge, like, oh, we have no dropouts anymore. They're still there, but we have not been doing this long enough to see the huge gains yet.
To piggyback on that, I don't mean to interrupt you, but a couple things we've seen right now, first of all. We've got 34,000 students, okay? Decent sized district, not huge or anything, but not small by any means. The first thing it's done is it allowed us to kind of take what limited resources we have and identify where they're needed most right now. That's the first thing it's done for us. In terms of what is the outcome, it's improved our dropout rate by 12.32%. I can't tell you that yet, but see me next year at the next conference. I'd love to.
I get that. I think even just going in there and saying, hey, we looked at the data, we were looking at them at 9 absences, and now we're looking at them at 8 or 7.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a change, right? I mean,
Sure.
That's a result of the data. being
Yeah.
applied.
It
That's
is.
kind of, so you may not have, there's a big home runs in the country, but just kind of start marching on. Those are the interesting.
Hopefully, next year's conference, if we get accepted again, come see us, we'll have some results for you.
Yeah, the achievement data too. We've got, again, our PLC teams are meeting weekly to make decisions using these dashboards. So instruction is changing on a regular basis based on this real-time data. So, gentleman right here.
Yeah, so I want to just say you kind of stole my thunder because
Oh.
I also am not from an education background. But before I get to my question, I just want to say that what you've shown us today is going to be directly applicable to the work that we do in the business I come from. And so I want to thank you for that. A couple of comments, and I think maybe I'm going to unite your comment with the issue of the data transparency. you had thought about there being a benefit to having that sort of a limited transparency where a teacher can see where they are relative to all their peers, but on a graph, but it doesn't tell them the identity of those data points on there, right? So they can kind of self-evaluate and self-correct, in midstream. With regard to your comment, some of the things that we're doing, we're looking for ways, and I'm seeing this in what you're doing, but we're looking for ways where we can take action, immediately. And I really like the point you made about trying to use the data in the middle of the process to make a change rather than evaluate whether I succeeded or failed at the end of the process. So with regard to what you had asked, I think a great way to evaluate that before you have a large amount of data would be, did I make a difference? Was there a student that was going to drop out that we identified early on and intervened and prevented that from happening? A student on your probability chart that was down near 1 that did not drop out, that graduated. If you've done that, to me that would be a success. That would be a win. So.
Thank you.
We had one more question right here. No, that one.
Quick technical one I could ask you.
Okay, we were out of time, and I'm going to make sure that we give the next speaker in this room time to get set up like they did that for us. So thank you very much. Please fill out the survey if you would, and I appreciate you coming.